If Russia ever decides to invade NATO territory, it's very likely that it will start right here on this 65-kilometer or 40-mile strip of land along the border between Poland and Lithuania. The reason? Well, this strip of land is the only thing separating the Russian territory of Kaliningrad from its ally, Belarus. Kaliningrad houses Russia's strategically crucial Baltic fleet and is armed to the teeth against any aggressor. It's an important location for Russia, but recently something very interesting happened here. According to recent intel from the British Ministry of Defense, Russia is moving critical military equipment away from Kaliningrad, which doesn't make any sense. So we dug a bit deeper into this and found some potential reasons, all of which are quite scary, but also unexpected. But first, we need to understand why Kaliningrad is so important to Russia. This is the Suwalki Gap, a choke point within both NATO territory and the European Union, effectively connecting the Baltic countries of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia with the rest of Europe. The area has been a major point of tension between Russia and the West since the fall of the USSR when the Warsaw Pact collapsed, leaving the Kaliningrad enclave isolated from the motherland. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the newly formed Russian Federation started to push for a solution to this glaring vulnerability. In 1996, Russian President Boris Yeltsin proposed to build a highway across the gap to connect Belarus to the Russian enclave, but Poland boldly refused the proposal. Since then, Russia has made no other official attempts and the gap has gained more strategic importance as NATO expanded to nearby former Soviet countries. See, the Suwalki Gap would be a crucial military target in any conflict between Russia and NATO. By seizing the gap and closing the choke point, Russia could effectively isolate the Baltics in no time. This could happen at breakneck speed too, as a 2015 study by the RAND think tank estimated that Russia, with proper coordination with Belarus of the Suwalki Gap, could take over the capitals of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia in 36 to 60 hours. But let's take this study with a grain of salt though, since we have seen Russia's botched takeover of Kiev and its military is currently busy in a major conflict in Ukraine. Still, according to the report, NATO wouldn't be able to rescue the Baltics in time and would thus face a set of undesirable options. 1. Plowing its efforts and resources into liberating the Baltics, which would be surrounded by hostile forces. 2. Accepting a debilitating loss at the start of the conflict. Note that this would go against its principle that an attack against one is an attack against all. And 3. Escalating the war into a full-blown invasion of Belarus and Russia from the broader European plain, while suffering from losses of personnel and machinery captured in the Baltics. So from Russia's point of view, this crucial maneuver to gain an early game advantage would be impossible without the arsenal stationed in Kaliningrad. For this reason, Russia has harbored advanced weapons in Kaliningrad, including new generation fighter jets, nuclear weapons and specialized troops. From Kaliningrad's advanced position, Russia has strike capabilities against crucial objectives hundreds of kilometers into the European mainland. One of Putin's moves has been to reinforce each side of the Suwalki Gap, sending 30,000 elite Spetsnaz troops to Belarus, installing missiles in the city of Grodno and finally striking a deal with dictator Lukashenko to store Russian nuclear weapons in Belarus. NATO is well aware of the region's stakes and has created programs to reinforce the Baltic states' military capabilities. In several areas of the Baltic region, Western countries are installing battle tanks, mechanized infantry battalions, artillery equipment, and air defense systems. While these moves show that NATO takes the Baltic invasion scenario seriously, harboring these forces in such a difficult to defend region could be a high-risk gamble. In any case, given Kaliningrad's strategic importance, it's easy to see why Russia would keep the territory heavily armed. But paradoxically, Russia has recently begun dismantling air defense systems in Kaliningrad. The official Defense Intelligence Update from the British Ministry of Defense of November 26, 2023 puzzled military analysts. According to the report, Russia is moving critical military equipment away from Kaliningrad, and this highlighted exceptional Russian air transport movements to transport a pivotal part of Kaliningrad's military defensive structure away from the enclave, most likely to be relocated here in Rostov-on-Don and later to be deployed on the Ukrainian front line. And the equipment they are removing is pretty important too. they're moving this, the S-400 Triumph missile system, Russia's response to the famous US Patriot missile systems. The S-400 represents Russia's state-of-the-art air defense system capable of targeting both aircraft and missiles, costing $500 million per unit. The devices consist of radars, mobile command posts, and missile launch platforms that can operate fully autonomously and synchronously. So, if Kaliningrad is so important, why is Russia disarming it? Well, there are a few possible explanations. Most Western analysts have interpreted Putin's move as a retreat, quoting the UK Defence Intelligence Report as its most westerly outpost and bordered on 3 sides by NATO member states. Russia sees Kaliningrad as one of its most strategically sensitive regions. The fact that the Russian MOD appears willing to accept additional risk here highlights the overstretch the war has caused for some of Russia's key modern capabilities. 2 years into the conflict, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is obviously not going to plan. The cost of the military operation may be so high that heavily arming every border with NATO members is unsustainable. Russia began showing signs of fatigue in its war efforts as early as the first year of the war in Ukraine. This weakness became apparent when they started substituting Russian army tanks and weapons with Soviet-era equipment dating back to the 1950s. Recently, Ukraine's military intelligence chief, Lieutenant General Kirill Budanov, declared that Russia has not yet recovered from the first year of the invasion when a good part of its regular army was destroyed. This loss pushed Russia to use more artillery shells than it could produce, and all but a fraction of deployed fighting vehicles appear to have been produced since the beginning of hostilities. These mounting battlefield failures would explain Putin's difficult political choice to double down on military spending in 2023, increasing the defense budget by 97.1%. What's telling is that Russia reportedly lost the same type of missile systems it removed from Kaliningrad. In August and September 2023, they lost 2 S-400 Triumph air defense systems in Crimea and 3 more units in the Luhansk region in October. Indeed, moving these important weapons away from Kaliningrad could mean Russia is losing its grip on the conflict in Ukraine. So let's take a look at another reason why Russia is disarming Kaliningrad. Another plausible explanation for disarming the enclave is the evolving strategic situation in the Baltic Sea. See, Kaliningrad has always been Russia's main stronghold in the Baltic and its furthest outpost into Europe and NATO territory. As I mentioned earlier, the missile deployment systems in the enclave could easily reach as far as 500 kilometers into European territory, even carrying nuclear weapons. However, the territory remains vulnerable. During a conflict, the Suwalki Gap would become a war zone, so Kaliningrad would rely on maritime routes from St. Petersburg to bring resources and supplies from mainland Russia. Now that Finland and Sweden have finally joined NATO, these waters are no longer neutral, making it even harder for Russia to resupply Kaliningrad during a conflict. The Baltic Sea has basically turned into a NATO lake, making wartime transit from St. Petersburg to Kaliningrad extremely tricky. During a sudden invasion of the Baltics, Stockholm and Helsinki could directly interfere with Moscow's plan via sea and sky, while simultaneously opening a third front against Russia along the 1,000-kilometer-long Finnish border, fueled by one of the largest artillery arsenals available on European soil. To make matters worse for Russia, Sweden's membership has brought NATO a valuable asset, the island of Gotland. See, Gotland is an island in the middle of the Baltic Sea, conveniently located just in front of Kaliningrad and home to a highly militarized strategic base. The Russians are well aware of the danger of a NATO presence in Gotland. In 2022, they flew fighter jets above the island, violating Swedish airspace to protest the country's application to NATO. But anyway, a NATO-armed Gotland is no laughing matter. The island could now be used as a crucial outpost to attack Kaliningrad directly, inhibiting Russia's offensive capabilities over mainland Europe and outmaneuvering any attempts to close the Suwalki Gap and isolate the Baltics. To make matters worse, the Åland Islands, which are part of Finland, play a similar role in this scenario, backing up NATO operations in Gotland while disrupting Russia's maritime supply lines from St. Petersburg. Considering all this, it's easy to imagine that this massive shift in geopolitics has made Kaliningrad less tenable and valuable as a strategic asset. This new situation may have pushed Russia to relocate some of the advanced military investment from the enclave to more crucial defense positions, including the Ukrainian frontline, the Korean outpost in the Black Sea, or possibly soon Russia's bases in the Arctic or the Pacific regions of Kamchatka and the Kuril Islands. Finally, there might be one last, more complex explanation for Russia's puzzling military choices in Kaliningrad. The reason for the apparent disarmament may be more than simple strategic considerations or the result of Russia's battlefield struggles. Instead, it could be a calculated diplomatic attempt to alter Western predictions of Putin's next moves. Since Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, many countries in Eastern and Northern Europe have raised their military spending significantly to deter a potential Russian invasion. This spending increase is especially visible in the Baltic region. Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania increased their combined military budget from $10 billion in 2014 to $15 billion in 2021. And after the invasion of Ukraine, military spending has skyrocketed all over Europe. Major European countries like Germany have announced modernization and enlargement of their military capabilities unseen since World War II. While all NATO members have been required to spend at least 2% of their total GDP on defense since 2006, only 1/3 of them had actually reached that target by 2022. Reassured by the enormous surplus guaranteed by the US military budget, which alone composes roughly 40% of the world's total military spending, NATO members had taken little initiative to meet these targets. However, since the extraordinary NATO summit in Brussels in March 2022, virtually all NATO countries pledged to meet the 2% threshold as soon as possible. To put things into perspective, if Russia had not alarmed Europe by invading Ukraine, it's estimated that total European military expenditure would have stayed much lower than it is now projected to reach. To put it mildly, Russia shot itself in the foot. While Putin had hoped to dismantle European ties and test the solidity of NATO's alliances, notably by jeopardizing energy supplies at the beginning of the war, things couldn't have gone further from the plan. European countries have proved to be closer than ever. Even worse, the common threat of Russian imperialism has drawn traditionally neutral Finland and Sweden into NATO, stretched the boundaries of Switzerland's sacred neutrality policy, and finally prompted talks to resume EU integration and expansion. Indeed, Russia's moves single-handedly stimulated the foundation of the European political community, a group that has helped repair communications between post-Brexit UK and EU member states. In this worrying picture for Russia, a de-escalation in the region makes sense as a diplomatic move. Indeed, many Eastern European countries now fear a Russian invasion and are calling for their allies' help. Some have claimed that the West's failure to prevent the invasion of Ukraine could tempt Putin to invade new targets. Thus, Putin's partial retreat from Kaliningrad could be interpreted by NATO countries as a sign of distress, reassuring them that Russia has no intention of further expanding west. Considering the decreasing strategic importance of the enclave as a whole, Russia might be hoping to downscale NATO's preparations for future conflicts and overall decrease pressure on its 2,500-kilometer or 1,500-mile-long border with the military alliance. After all, Putin's declared objective for the invasion of Ukraine was to prevent NATO's expansion and strengthen its borders. Now, not only does this objective seem farther than ever, but it also seems to be backfiring. All in all, many possible explanations exist for Russia's unexpected choice to disarm the Kaliningrad enclave, but upon closer inspection, the move just makes sense. There's probably more to it than simple emergency replenishments of frontline forces in Ukraine, including reconsiderations of the strategic importance of the Baltic Sea for Russia in the face of NATO enlargement and the willingness to tone down the perceived threat Eastern European countries feel from Russia. But what do you think? Do you have a different theory? Be sure to leave them in the comments down below. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.